All right, I never thought I'd post this, but it's been eating away at me. I moved into this apartment about 8 months ago. It's nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a 6-story building. The kind of place where you hear your neighbors arguing through the walls, and the plumbing always sounds like it's on its last legs. But it's cheap, and at the time, that was all I cared about. The weird stuff started a few weeks after I moved in. At night, I'd hear heavy footsteps coming from the apartment above me. They'd start around 1 or 2 a.m., just pacing back and forth like someone couldn't sit still. I figured, whatever, maybe the guy upstairs was a night owl or had insomnia. But it wasn't just that. Every night, without fail, there'd be this loud thud at exactly 3:15 a.m., like something heavy dropping on the floor. Every single night. After about 2 weeks, I'd had enough. I work early shifts, and this was starting to mess with my sleep. One morning, on my way out, I bumped into my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. She's this sweet old lady who's lived in the building for years. I casually asked her if she knew the guy upstairs and if he'd always been noisy. Her face went pale. "Sweetie, no one's lived above you for months," she said. "That apartment's been empty since Mr. Willis passed away." I laughed it off, said maybe someone had moved in recently, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. That night, the footsteps came again, pacing, faster this time, almost frantic. At exactly 3:15 a.m., I heard the same thud, only louder. It felt like whatever it was had dropped right over my bed. The next day, I went up to check. The door to the apartment was sealed with a chain, the kind they put on units when no one's supposed to enter. There was dust on the doorknob, like it hadn't been touched in months. Now I was officially freaked out. I started telling myself it had to be the pipes or the building settling, anything logical. But then, things got worse. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a strange sound, like whispering, but not in any language I could understand. It was coming from my ceiling, directly above my bed. I froze, every hair on my body standing up. I listened, heart pounding, and that's when I heard it. A voice, low and rasping, whispering my name. "Michael! Michael!" I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then, at 3:15, the thud came again. But this time, the ceiling cracked. A small piece of plaster fell onto my bed. I jumped out of bed and spent the rest of the night in my living room, lights on, TV blaring, trying to convince myself I was just imagining things. The next morning, I called the building manager and told him what had been happening. He gave me a strange look and said, "You're not the first tenant to complain about that apartment." Apparently, Mr. Willis, the guy who used to live above me, had passed away, under strange circumstances. The neighbors said he'd become paranoid in the last few months of his life, convinced someone or something was after him. He'd been found dead in his apartment one morning, and the coroner ruled it a heart attack. But people said his face looked twisted, like he'd seen something horrifying. I didn't sleep that night. I packed up my essentials and crashed at a friend's place for a few days. When I came back to grab the rest of my stuff, I found a single footprint on my bedroom floor, a dusty, bare footprint, right where I had been sleeping. I moved out the next day. I don't care if it was a ghost, a curse, or just my imagination running wild. Whatever it was, I wasn't sticking around to find out. This happened to me 2 years ago, and even now, I can't explain what I saw. Or maybe I just don't want to. I was house-sitting for my aunt in a small town while she was visiting family overseas. It was one of those older Victorian homes with creaky wooden floors and narrow hallways that made you feel like you were never really alone. I thought it'd be a breeze. Water the plants, feed the cat, and binge-watch TV in peace. No big deal, right? At first, everything was normal. The house was quiet, except for the occasional meow from Muffin, my aunt's cat, and the wind tapping the tree branches against the windows. But on the second night, things started to feel strange. Around 11 p.m., I was lying on the couch scrolling through my phone when Muffin bolted into the living room, fur standing on end, and hissed at the front window. Now, Muffin was a chill cat, so seeing her react like that set me on edge. I got up, looked outside, and saw nothing, just the dim glow of the streetlights in the driveway. I figured maybe she saw a stray cat or raccoon, so I shrugged it off and went to bed. That night, though, I woke up at exactly 3:07 a.m. No sounds, no alarms, just that unsettling feeling you get when something pulls you out of a dreamless sleep. The room was freezing, which was weird because I had left the heater on. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes, and that's when I saw it. The bedroom had one of those old, tall windows with thin curtains, and standing right outside, pressed against the glass, was a face, pale, gaunt, with deep, sunken eyes that stared directly at me. My heart stopped. I froze, not daring to move or breathe. I thought, maybe it's just a reflection? Maybe I'm imagining this. But then the face smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was wide, far too wide for a human face, stretching unnaturally across its cheeks. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body felt paralyzed, like I was locked in place by the weight of my own fear. And then it vanished. One blink, and it was gone. Just like that. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and grabbed my phone to call my aunt. But of course, no signal. I was standing there in the middle of the room, trying to convince myself I hadn't just lost my mind, when I heard footsteps coming from the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps, coming closer to the bedroom door. Muffin, who had been curled up at the end of the bed, let out the most guttural growl I've ever heard from a cat. She shot off the bed and bolted under it, leaving me completely alone. I stood there, heart racing, as the footsteps stopped right outside the door. I swear I could hear breathing, low, raspy breaths, like whoever was out there was trying to stay quiet. My hand shook as I reached for the door handle, ready to swing it open and confront whatever this was. But before I could, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. A whisper, soft, barely audible through the crack of the door. "I see you." I yanked the door open, adrenaline flooding my veins, but the hallway was empty. No one was there. I searched every room, every closet, checked the front and back doors. Everything was locked. It didn't make sense. I spent the rest of the night with every light on, sitting on the couch with Muffin in my lap, who refused to leave my side. The next morning, I called my aunt. I didn't tell her everything, just that I thought someone might have tried to break in. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she said, "I didn't want to scare you, but weird things happen in that house sometimes. My husband used to see things at night, faces in the windows." I left that house the same day. My aunt never brought it up again, and honestly, I never asked. To this day, I still don't know what I saw, or if it was ever really there. But sometimes, when I'm home alone late at night, I catch myself glancing at the windows, just to make sure no one's watching. And every time I do, I swear I hear that whisper again, just faint enough to send a chill down my spine. "I see you."
I was reluctant to share this story, but it's haunted me for years. It started 3 years ago when I moved to a new city for my first big job. I drove to my new apartment on a Friday night, eager to settle in over the weekend. The drive was uneventful, just me, some good music, and the open road. As darkness fell, I was on a long stretch of highway surrounded by trees and distant farmhouses. About an hour from my new place, I noticed a car behind me. At first, it seemed like just another late-night driver. The car stayed behind me, and I realized something was off. It was an old sedan, and the driver appeared slumped forward, almost asleep at the wheel. My instincts told me not to overthink it, perhaps they were just tired. I tried to shake it off and kept driving. Then I took a wrong turn and ended up on a dark, winding road in the woods. The sedan's headlights were still behind me. Panic set in. I remembered stories of people followed by strangers and how it could turn dangerous. I needed to stay calm and think clearly. Suddenly, the sedan's headlights flashed twice. It felt like a warning, sending a chill through me. I decided to speed up, desperate to distance myself. But the sedan matched my speed, and when I looked back, the driver was staring directly at me. My heart pounded. I turned onto another road, but the sedan followed. I debated calling the police, fearing I was overreacting. But deep down, I felt something was very wrong. Finally, I saw a gas station ahead and pulled in, hoping for safety. I got out of my car and saw the sedan idling on the road. Despite my instincts to stay inside, curiosity drove me closer. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a disheveled woman with wild hair and sunken eyes. "Please," she whispered. "You have to help me." Her words sent a chill down my spine. She claimed someone was following her and wouldn't leave her alone. It all clicked. She was as terrified as I was. I reached for my phone to call for help, but before I could act, she drove off in fear. I stood frozen as the gas station attendant came out. I explained what happened, and he called the police. As we waited, dread filled me. What was she running from? Her terrified eyes haunted me. The police arrived, took my statement, but found no leads. I drove to my apartment, but sleep never came that night. I replayed the events over and over, unable to forget that woman's fear. Months passed, but the memory lingered until one night, I saw her picture in a missing person alert. It was her, vanished without a trace. Even now, I wonder if she was truly in danger or if I stumbled into something more sinister. Passing that gas station brings chills, and I question if I could have helped more. Sometimes, truth is scarier than fiction, and perhaps some mysteries are best left undiscovered.